Yeah, maybe. Let's see. She answered my email and was supposed to.
No.
She was way more. I didn't want to. They should surprise.
Oh, really?
Oh. Well, I'm also, if you're on the hospital, I also work for hospital. I want to get a different. So I run our program life.
I'm also
Oh, cool. Nice to meet you. Oh, Holly.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, well, she has pictures.
I
looked up grants.
And it was the tower.
Billing. Yeah.
I looked up.
Yes.
I'm like.
All me. All right.
Right, go forward and back.
Yes. Perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much.
There's about 4 of us.
Maybe don't say anything.
No, it's like insurance.
Oh, you're off. I'll catch an eye. Yeah.
Okay, excuse me, everybody. Thank you for carving out time to be here today. I know one of the things on the topics is talks a little bit about how you spend your time. So I'm confident that everybody today will walk away having gained something, even if you've had this material before. Obviously, a refresher is really a positive thing, and it can help orientate you back to getting your priorities straight. Please have seats. There's some seats on the ends of the tables because we are tight on space. And there's a seat right next to me back to back. For some reason, no one ever sits next to me. So we have Dave Frizzy here today. Dave is a retired lawyer, a recovering.
Well, recovering is a term I normally use, but I don't want to be abusing of it. I'm trying to purge some of the thought process that I lived by for 45 years.
I asked Dave to be here today to present on this test because I think there's a lot of valuable material contained in this. And I found it extremely valuable for my own development, and I still find it valuable to go back and listen to. I listened to the author on YouTube a lot of this material. it led me down a rabbit hole of other, exploring other resources that Stephen Covey refers to in his material, like Man's Search for Meaning, which is really insightful about why people don't commit suicide, and understanding that process. I thought it was a valuable book for that. Man's Search for Meaning is written by a psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust. So anyway, I'll turn it over to Dave.
I'm gonna sit, stand, maybe walk around. I'm a little under the weather today. I'm not contagious in any way, shape, or form that I know of. Although maybe that explains why my wife is leaving town this morning. I don't know. Anyway, it's a pleasure to be here. If you're wondering why me, I was a lawyer. I've been a lawyer since 1974. I've been in this vicinity since '79. Over the course of, I retired the onset of 2000, just in time for COVID. And during that time, I did pretty much everything that a small town lawyer could do. I mean, I did murder cases, other kinds of criminal defense, did a lot of divorces in the early days, bankruptcies, a lot of bank money. All that I didn't do much of was that's perfectly all right. And I've always been interested in the idea of how people think. How do you do this? Many of us go through some kind of technical training. And if you have moved into the field of whatever technical training you have, you realize how insufficient that is as a way of functioning. It misses a lot. The training misses a lot of whys. Misses a lot of real life hows. Most of them will give you a language, grammar, and try to tailor your thinking so that you're comfortable in the silo of information you've chosen to spend your life in. But that's pretty limited. And somewhere along the way, I've heard about this book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I remember I used to try to go down to Florida, Silver Beach for a while, every year. And I think it was either 2 or 3 years in a row I took this book along. Never got as far as the 3rd chapter until the last time I took it down, and somehow or other, and I don't know if I was just bored or whatever, but I ended up reading more of it. And I don't think I finished it. And then I happened, I don't know where I ran across it. There was a seminar on 7 Habits down in St. Louis. It was like a 3-day course. And I was always interested in going someplace to attend seminars, especially for something like this. I know, well, maybe that's a lot easier to read a book. And I did, and it was something that gave me a couple of things that I've tried to live by, things that I've tried to build into my thinking. Now, I only half jokingly say that I only use my brain a couple times a month. When I retired and just shut my practice down, a lot involved in that. Things like client records, how long you have to maintain them, getting papers to clients and all that stuff. And so, that process is still ongoing 5 years later. But when I retired, I thought, well, this is great. I'm going to have all this time and so forth. I had it kind of mapped out in my head a little bit. And then I proceeded to go on a cruise, and on the cruise fell and wrecked my right knee. I got to learn that you don't want to ever have to have a lot of medical. Shit. Anybody old enough here to remember the Marcus Bolton show? Oh, all right, got one. Sorry,
That's
didn't mean to
okay.
ratchet out that one. Anyway, if you go on a cruise ship, and you happen to go down to the medical facilities, you'll get to see what medical practice is like in 1957. There was a guy that used to actually work at HRC part-time in Cap Brophy, and he once was in Russia and had appendix removed. It has emergency cases, and the ambulance came and got him, took him away. His wife didn't know where he was for 3 days, but they took some pictures, and it was very similar to that. So think about a 1960s era Soviet hospital, and that's what you see. So I went through that process, and then COVID kicked in while I was in recovery, and so I kind of just shut my brain down. A lot of people who didn't have to work did, and now the only things I turn it on for is I'm on the board of the hospital, and I'm the head of the hospital foundation, and so there's about one, and I'm the head of the endowment at the rec. Other things I've been involved in for about 20 years. The hospital for a little over 10. So about once or twice a month, I can turn my brain on and focus on those things. The rest of the time, it's kind of looking for a place to go. But what I found is that it was invigorating actually to go back through some of this material and realize how much impact it had on me. And I think what you'll find is there are some ideas you can take out of this, and they can make a difference to you. What's the single thing that you have the biggest shortage of? Yeah, that's what most people would say. The strange thing about this is that there's an aspect of it that it's creating time. If you expand the quality of how you use time, in effect, you expand it. Become more effective, become more productive. And a lot of this is about how do you, in your mind, create time? How do you make things work? You far better than I know the way that the little voices run around in your head, screaming at you, do this, do that. Think about this, think about that. Oh, wait, then you got real people on the outside maybe doing the same thing. And it's pretty tough. And so how do you harness that? And the 7 Habits it's one of the earlier self-help books. Briefly, what happened is Stephen Covey was, I think, working on his PhD, and his subject of study was self-improvement literature. And America has had a lot more of that than most other countries. I couldn't speak to where it is today, because you go back in time, there was not a big body of literature on the subjects of self-improvement in a lot of other countries, in Europe by and large. And Covey for his PhD, did a study of all of the self-help, if you will, literature. And he basically went back, I think, as far as Poor Richard's Almanac, which was edited by Ben Franklin. And he had a lot of other things along the way. And if you just look self-improvement books, and pick a decade and stuff, you find a listing of it. But so Covey assembled from all that reading these 7 habits. And, they've held up pretty well. I mean, in fact, we're still here talking about it. Says they have some resonance. I brought a copy of the book along if everyone wants to take a look at it. It's not necessarily the easiest read. And I had never looked on the web which for me is pretty much Google and YouTube. But there's a lot of material out there. I never had a reason to look at it before. I was just overwhelmed. So I bought us access to a slide program and built what you're seeing today from that. I'm not saying it's any better, but at least it gives you a little bit of a taste. So anyway, that's kind of what doing. So why are we doing this program? Well, your boss asked you to. But it's also a chance for you to change your rhythm. You're sitting in a different seat today. You're looking at things from a different perspective. Everybody just take a minute, just take a deep breath, hold it for a second, and release it. Feel anything drain out of you a little bit? This is not supposed to be hard today. If you can tolerate listening to me for a couple hours, good on you. But this is stuff that's there. If you want to pick some of it up and use it or take it someplace, that's up to you. But anyway, and again, so I'm just somebody who fell down this rabbit hole of this self-improvement things. And one of the things, side effect is that it led me to say there's another way of doing what I do. You probably can think of lots of different cliches about work. At some level, they're all true. Cliches exist for a reason. Stereotypes exist for a reason because there's evidence to support their existence. But there's better ways and different ways to do things. So the question is, how do you explore those? How do you carve out the time to do that? How do you even envision that it could be different? How do you change your thought processes? And that's part of what you come out of this. Given the size of the room, it's a little hard for me I was going to go through and ask everybody to identify themselves and so forth. Because as I understand it, at some level, you do meet periodically already. So, I've done programs before for people in the same organization and they never met. Maybe because they were on different shifts or they're in different buildings or their mission or jobs were so different. And so they didn't have any history of working together. You at least have some history of that by and large. Is that a fair statement? Okay. So we're going to skip that step just in the interest of time. I'm not getting paid by the hour, so you don't have to worry about that. One of the things that I'd like you to just keep in mind, however, and tuck this way in the back, you don't have to consult this as you're going through, but maybe afterward, just recognize that as you learn a little bit about these habits, that they are a conduit, they are a stimulus, they are a connection, that encourages you to go back and reconnect with the mission of the organization and the mission of what you do. And this is not, a cookbook. This is 7 different things. You get to pick what's most important. I'll tell you what I think is most useful. But if one thing interests you, go for it. Read a little bit about it. And again, in the world of YouTube, you can find plenty of talk about all this stuff. And you can see simplified versions of this, and you can see versions that are so complicated. I wonder where the hell where they came out from their rabbit hole. I think they're still down there and sending notes back. But anyway, the point is that this is some way that you connect differently with what you're already doing and why you do what you do. So here is the bonus habit. And this, I'm not exaggerating at all. Hear my voice pick up? I get genuinely excited about this. One of the things I learned in a self-improvement course, and you might monitor this. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing in life if you're more jazzed when you finish than when you started. Now, my hobby is I'm a musician. And I laid out for 25 years thinking I was supposed to be an adult. I've run my own rock band, if you will, blues band for over 20 years now. And I'm living part-time in Indianapolis, and so I'm starting something over there. And, it's one of those things that my butt can be dragging and I'm not feeling good. I get up and kind of haul this equipment around. And when I finish and my feet aren't touching the ground, I'm energized. doesn't last as long as it used to, but the point of it is it's there. And if you think back, there are things you've done, things you've been through, interactions, and you finish up and you think, wow, that's cool. That really, that worked. I feel good about that. Again, if you're more jazzed when you finish than when you started, you're doing what you're meant to do. Now, how do you never attend another board meeting while still showing up? Get this board by not attending. And I would encourage you to do this. Everybody's got something to write on, or almost everybody's got something to write on. And the rest of you, I'm sure, have, steel trap minds and nothing escapes. So do this. Commit today to teaching it tomorrow. Listen to this as if you have to explain it. I ran my own law practice for 20-something years. And I think we peaked out at one point, we had 14 people in the organization, had offices in 3 different towns. One of the things I always insisted on, and I was a big believer in sending my staff, to courses and programs, places. I always encouraged them to do was assume you're going to come back and teach it. And I would call them one. Often we would do that. We'd do a weekly meeting, and keeping that fresh was always a little hard. But so we're going to take 10 minutes, and you're going to tell me what you learned. What were the 3 most important things you learned at the program? I mean, I didn't tell them ahead of time what the question was going to be. So the point of it is, if you make up in your own mind, right now, think about, okay, who are potential people I could talk to about what went on? And that could be even the same 10 people you say, you're going to say, I don't know, it sucked. Those are the people you want to bitch to. Oh, you can still teach. You can tell them, don't ever do that. Don't ever attend that. But if you teach it, if you write it down, if you think, organize your thoughts, and if you're going to have to recite them back, what happens is boredom will pretty much disappear. You go into a meeting of people that you don't really know, and you're not sure why the hell you're there. All right, pretend, maybe make it real, but you have to teach something about what happened. You have to explain it to somebody. If you do that, you will find that you're not bored, you're engaged. You can do that as fear, you can do that as some other kind of motivation. But the point of it is, it really does work. And I can honestly say that for all the many seminars on really boring topics that I went to, I did a lot of estate planning, so I got a lot of tax stuff in the latter years of my career, and that's, it's not right, it's not wrong, it's just the way it is. And, getting organized enough to understand that, and be able to explain it to maybe to a client, maybe to a peer, maybe to somebody working for me. Because one of the things you'll see here is that it's my belief, and the belief of many, that if the people working for you understand why they're doing what they're doing, and you treat them like something more than just something attached to the computer, they'll be more motivated. And all of a sudden, you started a cycle that will lead to growth and improvement all over around and make your life easier. So again, commit today that you're going to teach tomorrow, and think about when you have time. I just say put a deadline on yourself. Maybe the deadline the day Friday. I'm going to take 15 minutes to talk to somebody about what at least one aspect of what I want. Now, that's a complicated looking drawing, and the 7 habits are listed over here. Be proactive, begin with the end in mind, put first things first, think win-win, seek first to understand, then be understood, synergy, and sharpen the saw. And if you look at the bottom down here, you're dependent. You start off in your life and then things dependent on a lot of other people. And so you want to work on yourself. And the first 3 habits have to do with and it's an arbitrary analysis and structure that I'm presenting to you. You may look at it differently. But these are the things that you're working on, if you will, inside yourself. Have to do with your thought processes. How do you manage yourself? And if you can do that, you become much more independent of a lot of the kinds of pressures life and other people will put on. So then you fall into the next three habits: win-win, see first to understand, and synergy. Those are the things where you're focused more on interactions with other people. You know, how do you get disputes or issues resolved in a way that everybody is kind of happy? How do I communicate? How do I make sure that in a discussion I'm understood? You know, and how do I somehow take the mix of emotions and facts and perceptions and so forth that are in a conversation or dispute and turn them into something bigger than that? Something that's where 1 and 1 is not 2, certainly not 1 1/4. It becomes 3 or 11. And there are some things to do once you know think about doing that. Sharpen the saw is what you're doing today. It's being here working on yourself. You're your own saw. You know, I mean, how do you organize a group of people going through a jungle with the machetes? What do they need? They'll just say, okay, you 12 people with machetes, start whacking. What else do you need? What needs to happen? Give me some ideas.
Direction,
Okay,
plan,
okay,
protective gear.
good, very good. That must be your skill set. All right. Let me ask this, since you're an expert. Do I need any to be in here today?
Not from me.
Okay, all right, I'll explain to that. What else?
Buy-in.
Buy-in helps. Okay. What's on the board? You need to sharpen the saw a little bit. Sharpen the blade. Okay, so all of those things that you just identified, that's what we're talking about. Like, that's what we're talking about. How do you know to organize? You know, somebody once said that the difference between a manager and a leader is you got a bunch of guys whacking their way through the jungle. And, you know, the leader says, hey, you climb that tree and see where we are. Guy climbs the tree and says, going in the wrong direction. Leader says, oh my gosh, we gotta do something. And the manager says, ignore that, we're making great time. All right, you can get lost for the wrong direction, you get lost in the process. So again, we're here today to sharpen your saw a little bit. So we're not really talking though about skills as such. We're not going to make you better in terms of clinical services or a better billing system or whatever else it might be. And we're not at some level increasing your technical knowledge in any way. And we're not talking about what you'd like to see necessarily. What we're trying to do is you figuring out more about who you are and how can you be the most effective you. You are all you've got to work with. And how much time you spend working on you. How do you even organize working on you? How many times does what's going on in your head resemble a bunch of unguided, unled people with sharp objects whacking it at what's around? Happens. So we're really talking about you and who you are. Now, here's a test. Right now, take a look at that. Right now, look. What was it? A what?
A woman dressed up.
Tell me more about the woman.
She had a feather in her hair.
Profile.
How old was she? Okay. Anybody see anything different?
So young.
I thought she looked older
Older.
with a head wrap, feathers sticking out of her eye.
Yep. I've got a point. Yesterday, I was actually able, as I was viewing some of this, I was actually able to blink my eye and move from one image to the other. Did everybody see both images? All right. If you're thinking old lady, that's her mouth. That's her nose. That's her eye. All right. See that? If you're thinking of the young woman, feather in her cap, there's her nose. That's her ear. And this is like a necklace. I can remember sitting on the beach saying, I paid $14 for this book and I'm laying here on a beach and I'm studying a picture trying to figure out what the hell it is. The point simply is that how you look at something and what you see may or may not be the truth. It may not be the reality. And not everybody's going to see it the same way. And I mean, I haven't looked at this picture in, a couple of years when I started preparing for this today. And it took me a couple minutes to get reoriented to being able to see both of it. So you can see you're both right. No matter which it is, there's evidence there to support it. So proactivity. To me, it's the space between stimulus and response. If I get that and I were to startle you, I didn't do a very good job of it. I started at least ask. You respond. Where's the space? How many times does somebody say something to you and it just sets you off? Happens to all of us. And do you find that when you're more tired, you're more easily set off? When you got more pressure on you, feel more set off. When you're trying to get something done so you can go someplace else and you're doing something else, particularly something you like, you find you're easier to set off. Okay. So what we're saying is that just because, and it can be the same stimulus, couldn't it? In each of those scenarios, and yet the degree to which it triggers a response from you, it could be the fight or flight or other kinds of things, it varies, which tells you that it's not a fixed unit. It's not mandatory. So how do you fill this, create a space between the stimulus and response? And what are you going to do with it? It's going to give you a place to choose. Back when I was doing trial work, you've all watched lots of court stuff on television, right? And you ever see, you got some lawyer who's being either really smart or really nasty or whatever, and they start asking a question and a rhythm develops. And they're leading the witness down some path. So they can ask some kind of question. Most lawyers are pretty crappy at it, frankly. But they all try. They want to be over it. Some of them will practice and done a better job of learning. But the point of it is that what I would do to try to combat that, my clients, and back when I was doing criminal defense work, they would oftentimes, let's just say they might have been involved in the conduct before we would be complained about. But they wanted to tell their side of the story. So I say, okay, promise me this. When he or she, the lawyer on the other side, asks you a question, I want you to stop for a second and do what we did 10 minutes ago. Deep breath, hold it for a second, release it. Then think about the question. Let that initial hit of the imposition of will that is being forced on you to dissipate. Give yourself the time to respond. Postponing a response is not a bad thing. How many times do you feel like you answered right away without thinking, wish you hadn't? How many times are you rewarded for that? How many times does that work out really poorly? I wish I hadn't said that. Probably there. So the thing is that how do you go about developing that space between the stimulus and the response? And the first thing is knowing that that space is there and you have the ability to affect it. You do. You get to pick. Maybe what you do is, if I feel pissed off, first thing I'm gonna do is before I react, I'm gonna think about that picture of the lady. Which lady am I looking at today? Doesn't matter. The point is, you know, there's two there. And you have at least two options about responding. To me, proactivity is probably the most important thing. Because, you know, how much time, those of you in clinical situations and where you're dealing with people who have their issues are front and center, often do you find that they're just prisoned into a, you know, they're like Pavlov's dog. We're all like Pavlov's dog. You know, bell rings, we're hungry. You know, I used to watch a lot of, you know, English society kinds of histories and so forth. And you know what happened? And my drink of choice is Scotch. I don't drink a lot, but I drink good Scotch. And I would watch television and I'd see him pour a drink. I want one. You know, how many times have you seen food? Like, oh, that's, yeah. Part of it is that, you know, sometimes you gotta do something to create that space. Right, you go do that? Do I really want to get out of my chair for that? I don't know. Part of it is that just knowing that space is there, then you say, okay, I'm gonna use that space, or I'm gonna go ahead and give in to the urge. You know, it's diet 101, really. So the point of it is that this proactivity is something that we are given the opportunity to work on hundreds of times a day. You know, right now, how many people are thirsty? There's your hand if you're kind of thirsty. Okay. How many of you are hungry? How many of you are tempted to eat something? If I broke right now, you said to eat something. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to assume the rest of you are liars. That's okay. But the point of it is you got a choice here. And just knowing that choice is there creates a world of opportunities. It's a practice. You get to choose the meaning of the input. How many times did you think you hear somebody, Ollie? My first one, when she introduced herself earlier, I thought she said Ollie. And I thought, that's interesting. I've never met a woman named Ollie. Okay. So the point of it is you give yourself time and then you decide how you want to feel. Here's one for you. I want you in your own mind to think about the last time somebody said or did something that pissed you off. That's something where you really felt the reaction. Just take a minute or two and think about it for yourself. Anybody want to share what might have set them off? I would encourage you to not use an example involving anybody else. That might not be a good idea. Anybody want to share anything? It's okay if you don't. I'm not going to compel you to share, at least not yet. So, all right, so.
I will.
Okay, great, go for it.
I have boys. They don't clean the toilet.
Oh my goodness.
Because everywhere else, I was so mad cleaning their toilet last night. I'm like, how do we do this? They're 18 and 14.
Right.
I'm gonna think about it and get mad again.
Yeah, you don't get to do that again until you're after 70.
Just sit down and go to the bathroom.
It must be all the boys. I have boys in all my.
Yeah. I mean, that's. Well, we could have a separate seminar on that sometime. But so the point of it is that, you know, so again, you got that response. And so sometimes I'll put words in your mouth. Sometimes you probably say something out loud.
Oh, yes.
You know, you can't do like a puppy in the throat and nose. Maybe you do. But so the point of it is that you also get to stop and think about it. Now, so if that happens, let's say with your 14 and 18-year-old, what if it's your 80-year-old grandfather? You know, but do you feel differently about it? It's the same, okay,
P is P, I don't care how old you are.
okay. And that's not unfair. You decide how you
I'm
feel.
sorry.
Does anybody else have, maybe it's just I'm expressing a great deal of self-pity here. You know, where, you know, well, I didn't mean to, and I'm old and determined, things don't work right. Sorry? Well, that's a great, those of you who have a nursing background, that is of course always an advantage. I'm not practicing law anymore, I can represent you in any licensure proceedings. But the point of it is, you get to decide. And the thing is that if your reaction is P, all right, what you just do? If that's really what's hardwired into you, then you don't have, you're gonna give the same response to somebody who should know better as you would to somebody who couldn't help. And that's not what any of you probably really want. So the point of it is that the stimulus, and then you also say, you know, what are we asking here? What are you thinking to them? What's going on in their lives? What were the stimulus things that are going on with them? You know, I found that for me, you know, I have a really good ability to see and analyze things and project things into a future and into other circumstances. You know, I mean, okay, I see what's going on here, and I can tell you pretty much what's going to happen 2 blocks down the road and in the alley to the right. I mean, it's an exaggeration, but in other words, I have that ability, and I will trip in the pothole that's right in front of me that I didn't even notice. All right, and so my bad habit, or one of them, is that because I'm so focused on that stuff, I make stupid mistakes right here in front of me. And maybe that's what's going on with it. You know, again, we're all, years ago when computers were new and cool, maybe they still are for you, I don't know. But you know, the notion came across that your brain is like a computer. How many times you heard that? But what it is it's every time you think a thought, you're more likely to think it again. Every time you do something, you're more likely to do it again. The whole notion of muscle memory and, you know, repetitive thinking, you know, the little man running in circles screaming in your head that we all have, you know, those are things that become hardwired. Maybe I didn't have any children, but I have through marriage acquired grandkids 5 and 8, and I've been around them since they were born. And to me, it's amazing how many of those kinds of programs are really hardwired. Where the hell did they learn that? Okay, so the point of it is that I'm not making excuses for pissing on the floor. I want that to be very clear. Not part of what I'm doing here.
That's fair.
Thank you. But so what I'm getting at is the fact that it's never that simple. And so if you treat it as being that simple, with whatever connotations you put it on, what did you just do to how you have to conduct yourself? You know, because I can't imagine too many circumstances where at least the 14 and 18-year-old, you're going to apologize for bitching at them for missing. All right, you're not going to. All right, but because of your reaction and so forth, you just deprived yourself of any choice. I'm not saying there would be a better choice. Under some circumstances, maybe. You know, or you can open it up. That's only because you came in drunk last night, right? You know, whatever. Yeah, okay, whole nother one. But you start seeing that, you know, so your child comes in drunk. You know, and you can say, no, never do that. Now, where are you coming from? Look what I did. You know, I remember when I did that. You know, I mean, whatever your history is, you're bringing it to the game. You're hardwiring everything you've allowed to be hardwired in you is there, and you're not getting to make a choice because that little voice in your head running around is distracted from whatever it was yelling about before, and now it's gonna react to this. Make that problem go away. I won't ever see that again. All right. No, exactly. Yeah. Well, you can hit the toilet with that, so give me your phone. What's the trouble with that? The thought by somebody who's never had it.
They do have in the bathroom sometimes. Get off far off.
But so you see, again, that notion of having time, creating the time to escape from your own programming and at least consciously or semi-consciously letting some of these other forces, you know, if you view it as a bunch of carousel of thoughts rotating through your brain, you know, you can pick one that's going to trigger your response. You don't have to just say, we'll talk about the red one that's right in front of you.
It's really limiting.
Sorry?
Your response. It feels really limiting in your responses.
Oh, yeah.
I look at it as only urine on the floor. I feel like the only option I have is to yell at the person. Or keep them in the solution.
Well,
It feels limiting.
I'm gonna do that.
I'm 75 and I'm going to say I'm going to be a lot more careful.
But I think this kind of conversation, I miss, I mean, because even Julie, like, can you attest, that sometimes I miss seeing the other point of view, and so like, that's a big thing he's working with, not being so reactive and doing those types of things. So next time they piss on the floor, I might not be as mad.
Well, I'm not saying don't be mad. What I'm saying is,
Respond
Now,
differently.
well, but like, what do you do at that time? All right, we know inside you're going to think about it and so forth. That doesn't mean you don't have to develop, or that you can't develop a stone face
Right.
or a look. You know, sometimes a look is a lot more effective than anything you can say.
Yes. You're absolutely right.
Terror doesn't require any spoken words. I didn't say I completely recovered from being a lawyer yet. But so anyway, one of the interesting things that comes out of proactivity is the notion you never get to say, she made me feel, or he made me feel. All right? So you got a 14-year-old and 18-year-old who have their issues. Do you want to turn, and this is a tricky question because children do get at us in a whole different way. But so let's pretend that somebody else does something nasty, or what seems to be nasty, and you want to react to that. And somebody you don't like. You know, the question you have to ask yourself is, would I, if but for that stimulus, would I turn over my emotional well-being to that person? Would I put them in charge of me? Would I let that son of a whatever tell me what to think, feel, and do? Because that's what just happened. You surrendered. Now you can say you surrendered to the little man in your head, but to the rest of the world, it looks like you surrendered to the person, you know, to this conversation is going to take place at a level that they picked. Maybe they didn't even know they were picking it. Or they may have done it malevolently. Part of it is you got a whole array of things that go into that piece of conduct. You know, how many times do people tell you, I didn't mean anything by it? Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. In this moment, they maybe regret doing it, or they think, by me saying that, you'll respond differently again. You'll like me again, or what have you. But the point of it is, you don't surrender your emotional health to them. Nobody can make you feel. I'm not saying that's absolutely true. Because, like your children and stuff, I mean, your parents, you know, or people you're close to, carving that space, you've already embraced them. So there's not a whole lot of space there. It's harder to use, but you've also got a wider array of history that will go into even your reactions. So the point of it is, though, you're not surrendering. Nobody's going to make you feel something. You're surrendering to them. So if nothing else, next time you're angry, you know, because you're reacting to something, say, I'm not angry about what he just said. I'm angry that he or she's trying to make me feel something. And you get to say, am I gonna deal with that at the same level that they put it on? You know, we'll talk more about that. And, you know, one of the things that I find that I've gotten older, I'm trying to be a better listener, is that I'm struck by how many times absolutely pointless arguments take place. One person is driven by emotion, the other's trying to deal with that logically. How well does that work? Anybody in here ever see logic trump emotion? Yeah, okay. That's my experience too. You know, you got to find a way to change the dynamic, but you need time to do that. Recognize what's going on, and that's what productivity is. The book Man's Search for Meaning. How do you find meaning when you're in Auschwitz? You know, the point that it comes across from that book, which I read back in college, is that if you have the will, you always have a choice. How you feel about it, what you're going to make of it. It's not the stage you thought you were going to play on, not the music you thought you were going to dance to, but the point of it is you still got a choice about how you look at it. And, you know, maybe that gives more freedom to your imagination. Not for the circumstances of where you want to retreat into your imagination anyway. Just some thoughts. All right. A couple other things about this, or side effects. If you're reactive, you're saying the world's doing this to me. This is all happening. I can't do anything about it. We all feel a lot of that today, I think. But I think people have always felt that. The focus in the book, they talk about a circle of concern and a circle of influence. And if you view it as a series of concentric circles, the circle of influence is the group of people who you can influence their conduct because of relationships, what have you, or structural circumstances. The circle of concern are things you care about that are bigger than that, you can't control all of them. And so, if you're reacting, you're focused on things you're not controlling. If you're surrendering, you can't exercise it. So if you're surrendering, how have you given up the ability to influence people you care about? You've got the ability to really have any kind of positive impact on the person who seems to have triggered this. A proactive focus says you can always respond and by thinking. And what happens is if people who are not people that ordinarily you influence, if they come and they trigger that response and you show a thoughtful response, how many times do you think that might have the effect of saying, I'm going to listen to what that person said? Maybe the person who comes in emotionally, maybe they start calming down a little bit. You know, I'm not being Pollyanna-ish here, but the point of it is that, you know, your ability to influence people is greater if you are the one responding as opposed to the little man running around your head. Okay. Get with the end in mind. I looked this up. There are so many quotes about this. Some of them seemingly in direct opposition to each other. I thought these were pretty good. You know, my favorite was anybody ever heard the name Yogi Berra? Okay, he was a baseball catcher and he was pretty famous for Malaprops. And one of his supposed famous sayings was, if you come to a fork in the road, take it. How many times you tried to do that? Okay, I'm gonna try to do both these things. Yeah. Anyway, part of it is it helps to have some idea where you're going. Leadership's about going somewhere. If you and your people, those you influence, don't know where you're going or want them to go, your leadership doesn't matter. All right? Imagine that you're the drum major leading the parade. New band. All right. And, you just put, a mask over the eyes of everybody behind you. How well is that gonna work? The people who you want to follow you need to know where you're going. They need to know how fast to walk. They need to know when they're gonna turn, they need to know when to play. So you can still have all the same moves and move the baton around the same way, blow the whistle all you want, but people may not follow you. So you have to stop and always begin with the idea of what do we want to accomplish? What do I want for myself? What about for others, the organization? What outcome do we need? When you're thinking about your own situation, it's easy, you see how to start getting interdependent. Remember we talked about the idea of, well, the first 3 habits are a lot about you, and the last 3 are more about interactions. But again, you're all you got. And so what you bring to interactions is what you develop. And knowing that you need to have a sense of direction will give courage and guidance to the people you can influence. And so looking at the outcome, if you have the freedom to think and not just react, when you're thinking, you can say, well, what do I need? What do the other people need? What do the other people I care about need? Yeah, this was a kind of a tortured slide, but let me you start, when you're figuring out where you're going, you got to start with you. Where do I want to go? Then you start bringing in, what gives me a sense of security? What kind of guidance have I gotten? What kind of wisdom have I acquired? How much power do I have? And then what happens, and maybe your concerns about where you're going depend on family, money, work, possessions, etc. But making the point here is that what you set up as what you need is driven by some or all of these things. And recognizing that you get to set at least some of your goals in your life. What's that again? That's a choice. And yet I've got an automatic way of doing that. What am I taking in? Am I stopping and thinking about what my experience has been or what I saw somebody else? Am I taking into account the fact we haven't got the money to do? Am I taking into account the fact that I'm inclined to do this because it's more fun? So the point of it is, or I'm setting my goal because I don't want to ever have to deal with that bastard. The point of it is that you have to be mindful even when you're deciding on your goals, because they didn't come from nowhere. And they weren't all imposed on you, not only because where you're going, but even some of how you get it. Third habit is putting first things first. Now, there's a number of different names of this. I saw it called an Eisenhower quadrant. Eisenhower being the former president general. And it's a useful grid. And I use it a number of times in my working days. And you make a list off to the side of everything that you have to do. And then what you do is you say, okay, is it important? Maybe you put a yellow marker next to it. Is it urgent? Maybe you put a red marker next to it. Some things may have, by this point, no marks. Some will have 2. And so what you find is that there's going to be stuff that's urgent. I'm really going to get on this. This is going to explode if I don't deal with it today. Other things are saying, no, this isn't urgent, but it's still important. Some things, how many things are urgent and yet not important? And how many things are neither of those? neither urgent nor important. It must have sent an earlier version. Bear with me just a second. Yeah. So, one way to look at this is if it's something that's urgent and important, I got to do it. If it's something that's not urgent but it's important, well, I have to make a plan to do it. When am I going to do it? Because how many important things end up becoming urgent if you don't do it? If it's urgent but not important, is there somebody else I can ask to do it or to help me with it? Maybe you break the job down into multiple pieces. And some things just say, how the hell can I get this off my desk so it never shows up again? And if it's not important or not urgent to me, to whom would it be important? To whom would it perhaps seem urgent? And when you're supervising somebody, it helps to stop, reflect on the idea. How many times you put a task you're assigning up here? Once you get on this and get it done right now. Hey, John's got an important speaker coming in, get that damn slide up. Program going. And yet, maybe what he was thinking is, shit, I don't want to deal with that. Part of it is perception on the receiving end may not be the same as yours. So again, as we talk about communicating aspects, you see how just because you've got a point of view doesn't mean other people don't have a point of view. But you got to start with yours and decide in what quadrant you find this. And when you're trying to figure out what your priorities are to do, it's worth also thinking about the steps that it's going to take. You know, sometimes a thing that's not that hard becomes hard because you postponed it. You didn't plan it. And so instead of steady array of easy steps, maybe even undertaken by different people along the way, you got a series of, you know, leaps that are taller than a. So again, you have to just figure out which of these are really important and which are not, and which are urgent and which are not. There's one set of opinions about things that are, and people will have different opinions. You know, I don't think my life would change much if Facebook didn't exist. Except maybe the fact my wife would demand more attention from me. But she uses it a lot. How many times, and we get in a habit, you know, that again, the little wheel and carousel going around your head, oh, it's time to check emails. You just did it 2 minutes ago. It doesn't matter, I got my phone in my hand. That must mean I have my emails. You know, again, thinking about these things, the goal is to spend as much of your time as possible in quadrant 2. Things not urgent, but they're important. In a sense, the long-term benefit can dominate. The long-term approach to things can be what drives it rather than, I got to survive today. This is a wonderful example of an internet slide because I have no idea where those percentages come from. But I think they illustrate a point. You know, how many times in your life have you found something, I don't want to get involved in that, they found out why it was done, where they were going with it. They say, well, in that case, I can sign off. Okay. So again, the point of it is that when you have goals, don't keep them secret. You know, there's a phrase I heard, I was actually in a business and business of law coaching program for about 14 years. And one of the things they talked about was throwing your hat over the wall. Throw your hat over the wall. What are you going to do? Public act, just throw my hat over the wall, what do I have to do?
On the wall again.
Exactly. And the point of it is that if I don't, I look like an idiot to everybody around me. So you make a public statement by throwing your hat over the wall. What do you say? I'll come over the wall. So the point is that don't keep what has to be accomplished secret. You know, you go back to that urgent and important thing. It's a little hard to always have the time, the opportunity, and the environment in which you can explain why at that moment. That doesn't excuse you from, in a sense, an obligation or at least a recommendation that you do it later. And look, I know we haven't got time to talk about it. I just really need this done. But I promise you, I will come back and tell you what happened and why we didn't do it. That's a technique that doesn't get used very often. But how often are you just going to leave people hanging? All right, we all do. Again, why is there a phrase busy work? We all know, we know the concept. You know. Oh, how would one of you define it for me? What's busy work?
Processing things, mindless work.
Okay. I mean, everybody here got some busy work? Okay. So what are your responses? These are what popped in my head. Well, in a perfect world, you can eliminate it. Because maybe it's busy work to everybody. Maybe you can figure out a way that we can reduce my need to do this by, in some way, recognizing this produces reports that nobody reads anyway. It's not necessary. You know, I mean, you look at most computer programs and the few guys I know that are technical about it, you know, they can generate reports about things that the rest of the world doesn't understand. And they certainly don't care about. So just because you can generate a report, I mean, anybody ever sit down with a new software program? Oh, wow, I can do this. You get excited, you want to share that. And then, you know, you realize that 2 hours later, well, that's pretty worthless. You know, so we all, again, have a choice about responding to that. Maybe we can automate something or systematize it. How can we change maybe the steps before it gets to us so it doesn't get to us at all, or other people have different roles or it's processed differently. And maybe it's delegated. And maybe it's delegated to somebody, and for them, it will be a way they can test themselves. It's going to be important to them as a challenge to prove to you that they can do something. You know, again, it's kind of, you know, in that sense, a challenge that you read initially as busy work is like any other thing you're reacting to. How do you step back and make a choice? And you maybe see that that's why proactivity, I think, is so important, because it colors everything. It's what creates time, creates the opportunity to say, can we eliminate? Can we reduce pain? Can we eliminate? Now, when you're also looking at this whole idea about important and urgent, it's worth saying, and again, we've already talked about the notion of where are you going. The story of the goose and the golden egg. You all know the story? You nodded your head, yes. I thought you. So, would you tell the story about the goose and the golden egg?
Just in general, it's different versions of it. The one individual had a goose, started laying golden eggs. He thought it was pretty awesome. Took the goose. The version I've heard that he didn't take care of it properly, he stopped laying golden eggs. And had the result.
Exactly right. Greedy version is that he sold the goose, and somebody else said, well, I can do things to the goose that will make it produce more eggs. Maybe that works, maybe it doesn't. But the ultimate was, I'm gonna cut the goose open because that's where all the eggs are. So sometimes you can have something that's working well, but you have to take care of that which is helping produce it. Maybe that's a piece of equipment, maybe that's current version of some software, maybe that's a system, maybe that's a team of people that you're working with. You know, even when things aren't going well, when do you reinvent things? Okay. I'll tell a story here. One of the things that I've been on the hospital board for Paris for about 10 years. And one of the things that I've liked watching is weird. You know, the healthcare system's got a lot of problems. We're a not-for-profit, very small, we're one of the smaller hospitals and one of the smaller community service areas around. Yet we have to be world-class like anybody else. Our rules are the same. Seizures are the same. The illnesses are the same. And we don't get a lot of dengue fever, but or crocodile bites. But you know, by and large, it's the same. And you know, for most of the hospital's history, its back was against the wall. How are we going to keep the doors open? And in the last 10 years, that's turned around. You know, we have over $20 million in the foundation now. When times were going really well, I mean, we even made money. Again, it's important to recognize that even when you're in a not-for-profit, as you guys all are, you have to make money. You know, we all love to be Franciscans, just give it away. All right, but that's not what we need to do. So we've got a whole bunch of challenges. And so for the last 10 years, you know, the hospital has done well. We made money during COVID. And that was a result of good management, it's a good luck in the nature, the mix of how many beds we have and so forth, triggers certain payment rules from insurance companies and from the government. But when times were good, they looked for more opportunities to serve people. That's what triggered all the construction that you see. That's what's triggered the fact that the hospital's got facilities down here. You just said 3 years ago that we were going to have facilities in Indiana. I said, never. The late Dr. Phipps was my best friend, the one that persuaded me to get onto the hospital board. He started off with these encouraging words. David, I promised I'd never do this to you, but. But the point of it is that in good times, what do? You don't rest on your laurels. You figure out, how can I develop this further? How do I take care of the golden goose? How do I grow the golden goose? You know, and you think about all the different things that you guys each need. Every one of your departments, I'm sure, in some place in your head, if not on a pad, someplace on your computer, you got a list of all the things you need. And again, I want you to take a second and just look at everybody else in the room. Just scan the room. Just look at faces. Think about the jobs. All right. Every one of those lists you got, they got one too. All right. And again, some of your departments may be going really well. Say, I'm a golden goose. Others are saying, oh, hell, I'm just quacking, not getting anywhere. But so the decision about what you invest in is complicated. You know, you want to take care of the goose, but just because, you know, if we had said, for example, at the hospital, we're doing really well in this thing right here, that's all we're going to do. All right. What are the consequences of that? Other things maybe get worse. And how many people can we take care of in that given field? You know? It's a challenge, and it's a challenge to each of us to understand that the organization has got to be taken care of. That all the departments have to be taken care of. And that doesn't mean you don't have to be taken care of as well, or in the EGC. But there needs to be processes to go through that. And as you'll see, as we talk about the interdependence, there are ways that we can talk better about some of those things. Okay. So these are the next 3 habits. What I'd like to do is take maybe 10 minutes right now and we'll break. What's the seat on your head? Cubs. Cubs. Okay, I'll hold that. Okay.
Choose to. In this building.
Oh, wow.
Here, I'll let this.
Yeah, on this floor, they're everywhere.
Yeah. It's the only building we have that has bathrooms everywhere.
Bathrooms everywhere.
Yeah. Not a single one on the
I know, I wasn't sure I was gonna help get out of the one upstairs.
Oh, yeah.
Literally back there in the corner.
Yeah.
I know exactly what.
It's on the right here. But, man, I'm really glad you just like it much better now.
Yeah.
Gremlin starts going again. Oh, my brain.
I really do. See, not a bad
Well,
idea.
you know, I saw somebody else.
I'm not doing this at all for the change.
Not a bad idea.
Everybody's asked.
We helped with the class this year.
Good.
For the human services piece.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I don't know. They changed directors about the same time I retired. I don't know.
You guys find that data.
But I know.
Well, see, Linda and I knew each other from the courthouse stuff, but I don't think she ever saw me in that setting. So. Oh, that's all right. Yeah, that's, again, with the way some of the stuff has happened, you know, needed to get away to see what parts of this I still like.
No.
Yeah, this is fun.
I see how doing this kind of stuff can make quite an impact. We're hitting a lot of leaders. Even one person.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Which is amazing. So that's
Oh, yeah, I did. That's, yeah, I just see light bulb go on.
Yeah.
That's really encouraging.
Next time you can provide ribs.
Right back.
Yes. Good to go. Yep, I did one.
Good, now I know how to do it.
Yeah, it worked. You can help do more this weekend, and I'll know when you're ready to fall one, but so far, so good. I appreciate it.
I have not been able to.
Okay, come right here.
Right here.
Stop right here.
Like a huge bag and card to go with it. I figured.
When it came in.
That's one of the things that aggravates me.
But it's fixed, I had to have.
All I got.
Put it down for a
Get
minute.
rid of that.
It was spinning. Some people don't. I don't know why. Until you restart it. Yeah, okay, so you get deployment tool, you download like the big file.
I will like wait
the
for
file
every time.
Will that be on the guest?
Yes, I will. It'll be on the Instagram.
One of my grandparents draws good.
Yeah, I didn't know it didn't have.
It used to have Libre, and it had, I used to use Libre for it, and then I'll load at some point and just stop. I'll load off. I need more.
Okay.
Yeah, really. Look out.
No, I was trying to just maybe some.
I get that when I work. Oh, really?
Oh, Rob's still kind of working.
When do I get it?
You get a proof, you get it.
Okay. Yeah, I actually did also. It actually put, so.
Yeah, I think it's just on there.
Well, it says. For March 17th. Well, really. It's March.
Yeah, I think it's on the list.
It hasn't happened since I got
But you're going.
Well, one, I know that.
Please, I wanna see that.
She knocked me backwards, I run over Stacy and we just.
The non-issue to have.
I'm
Then you have
right.
a whole new.
That was a 16-hour outing plan, and the only thing that I put it off was my face.
There's a relatively fresh copy, and no, I did not read it.
Did you make it?
No, I sort of started in the middle of the. I gotta go where it's like. And legitimately, I yelled.
And I got it every time.
What do you do here?
I'm the student janitorial job.
I'm just waiting.
What? That's a bigger job.
Yeah, so ADSD.
How long you doing?
Do you want to pay more?
I do, when you're short. I know.
Yep.
If you can hear me, we're gonna start in 60 seconds. Was there a backstory to your name, Sarah?
No, not that I know of. I wish I had that whole life. My mom loves men. I should, I should make one up.
I don't know.
Yeah, I love that.
It's possible.
I don't really know this. Yes.
Yeah. It's short. I haven't got it yet.
Okay, we'll go ahead and start. The next three things, and I'm gonna talk faster if that's possible. Deal from the get-go with the idea of interacting with other people. Think win-win, think first to understand them, be understood, and synergize. I'll tell you a couple of things I think are important about this. One of the things that comes through the idea of thinking win-win is that how many times when you're in an interaction with somebody, you know, there's a winner and there's a loser. You know, I think most of the time. And that doesn't mean that it's easy to measure in some tangible way the scope of the win or the loss. But you can even tell from the feeling. Maybe you can tell from the face. Maybe you can tell, oh, I know that smile. That's one where he pretends he agrees with me. And I know inside he's. All right. So the point of it is that there's often a win proof. And any of you have to deal with the same people every day? Oh, wait, you meet every 2 weeks. You know, the point of it is that means that in a moment, you can destroy a relationship. You can say, there's no future in this relationship. It can be one thing. Maybe it came out of a lot of the things, you know, and again, none of us are watching the carousel of the brain. You know, with that metaphor earlier today. I like it. Or hammer you with it. The carousel going around in your head with all these different forces and ideas and so forth. You know, we don't get to see what that looks like, what somebody else's carousel looks like. We just know our own. And so you don't really know what they came into the meeting or the interaction expecting. I mean, how many times have you had something you thought was going to be a very innocent, short, transactional conversation and it blew up in some way, shape? Happens. So again, what does that tell us? That notion of mindfulness, that notion of thinking and recognizing that there's a stimulus and response, and there are ways and techniques of communicating, and that's part of what we'll be talking about the next half hour or so. And so if you want to have a reaction or an interaction be part of an ongoing relationship, let me give you another concept, and it's not in the book, but it's one that I use a lot. Every time you and I interact, we are creating an emotional bank account. Okay? So imagine that it's a jar. Well, a big one for jars of marbles. And so every time we have a successful interaction, we're saying, that was good, we should put it on marble. And so over time, hopefully, the quantity of marbles in that jar increases. Now, if we have enough interactions, there's going to be a day where I really piss him off. It's going to happen. He's a Cub fan. It's just inevitable. But my late best friend was a Cub fan, and I was glad he got to live long enough to see the World Series. So that made me feel really good. And you know, I had to stop gloating about the Cardinals. But so the point of it is that at some point that's going to happen. And when you have that reaction, then somebody is going to reach in as a loser and it's going to take marbles out. And of course, if you have enough of those kind of interactions, ultimately you end up with an empty jar. There's no longer a bank account. Think about every time you deal with fill in the blank. Husband, your wife, your kids, your parents, siblings. You know, when a relationship, sometimes the jar that the marbles are in can be a little opaque. You're not really sure. You think everybody's putting it in, and yet you do something innocent, or you think it was innocent, and all of a sudden the jar is empty. Somebody else said you took out all the marbles. You didn't mean to. But the point of it is, if you start thinking about every interaction that way, with the goal of increasing that the number of marbles in that jar, the more successful the relationship will be. Okay, so to me, that's a really useful tool. I used to talk to a lot of people about that. We used to do that. We would talk about it explicitly inside of the office. As an aside of the notion of the importance of setting goals, I'll tell you one more marbles in the jar. 7 years ago, I read this idea. And what I did was, I looked at the age expectancy tables to see how long I would live. And I then divided by 7 to see how many Saturdays I would get. And so I went out and I bought some marbles, and I had the teenage daughter of one of the people who worked for me, who got my count out and put that a marble in for every Saturday that my life expectancy said I'd be alive. And every Saturday I took one out. And I looked at it. What did this marble mean? What do I have left? When I retired, the jar, such as it is, with marbles in it left, is now sitting in my garage. And it's like the portrait of Dorian Gray or something. I don't really want to look at it. But the point of it is that, you know, again, measuring things like that, thinking about what you're doing, measuring progress, measuring passage of time, measuring the health of organizations, the health of interactions, is a really useful technique. I just look for opportunity maybe to do that. So again, imagine that you have a situation where there's a win-lose. And if you're the loser, how do you feel? What are you going to do? You know, you got a doormat model. You know, I mean, if there's a compromise between somebody that's pushing you on the other side and you just roll over, you know, what do we say about repetitive actions, repetitive responses? Every time you roll over, it's going to be easier to roll over again the next time. Every time you surrender to the little man screaming at you in your head, it's going to be even louder next time. You know.
Listen, to help connect that, one of the things I've seen people struggle with in that area is like, and something I've struggled with in that area when I've been more of a day-to-day scheduler and stuff, like schedule requests. My God, that's like one of those things that you can totally be alive with. We'll always have special requests for schedules. Say yes to something, and then they come back and they want something else. They want something else, and they want something else, and just that's.
Setting aside the clinical use of the term special, everybody in here is special. Of course, we all are. You know, I hadn't been in town very long, and I don't remember if I overheard this or a friend of mine didn't told me, and I would happen to be the subject of the conversation. And another lawyer said, well, Dave's all right, but he always wants to come in and be the hero. Anybody here not want to be the hero? We're all the heroes in our own dramas. All right, and so that makes us many times right. You know, I mean, you want to have confidence in your own opinions and your own decisions. But, you know, if you're really certain, what's the other person's wiring? Are they more likely to become a doormat, or are they also, I'm convinced I'm right? Or we all we bring to the knife fight is what we're carrying. All we bring to the hug is what we're carrying. So the point of it is that if you have a situation where you know you're going to lose, you're not going to commit to a dialogue. And every one of us has walked into conversations saying, nothing good's going to come of this. I'm not going to get what I want. You know, now, am I accurate? Maybe. Am I being sullen and, you know, being a wuss? Maybe. But the point of it is that none of this is sustainable unless everybody walks out ready to put marble in the jar. So here are some things that you have to take in mind. First of all, recognizing that from conflict, good can come. What's better than losing besides winning? What was that?
I said earning.
Well, that's something to that. Push. How about no deal? Sometimes if you can't do win-win, and what do we say about losing? You know, all the bad things that can flow from that. Your alternative ought to be win-win or no deal. Anything else is a patch. And if again, sometimes you can have something that's close to neutral and say, you know, we got enough marbles in the jar, we can take you out, and this will be okay. So have a healthy relationship where it's all right if people disagree. But sometimes what you want to do is say, let's just agree we're gonna leave the marble jar alone. Let's just not do the deal. We can't work this out today. I think there's a slide in here that may talk about this, but you know, there's variations on this, but this version of the Einstein quote that I heard is that no problem is ever solved by thinking at the same level as that which created or identified the problem. That different level can be a distance thing. It can be looking above. It could be a different perspective. But the point of it is that in doing that, what you don't want to do is have the other person be the loser. Unlike this weekend's Cardinal Cup series. So anyway, when you have a conflict though, what you want to do, you want to acknowledge it. You know, I mean, as people are talking, and we'll come to another powerful tool about this in a minute, but you want to be ready to acknowledge that there's a conflict here. And what are the pieces of it? What are the elements of that? What's driving her? What's driving me? What do you have in common? What pieces of this can you come to an agreement on? And it may be just, well, we really don't like each other. And we both are resistant to coming up with something that makes it look like the other one is doing. You know, and maybe this isn't the time we should have this because I'm already pissed off. All right. It's a variation on the no deal. All right. And you at least know where you are in the relationship. But if you say, well, at least we know we disagree about this, but is there something besides the fact we disagree? Is there anything in it that we agree on? Well, yeah, that there's a problem. And that, what's that do? That opens the door for a question. How did we get here? You know, and again, if everything's, well, you did, and you did, and you did, okay, you're not going to get very far. But, you know, sometimes you may make the decision, it's okay, I'll absorb this abuse now because it's going to teach me some things. But look for a higher altitude. You know, one of the things that happened during the Civil War was that hot air balloons had started to be made. And so there were some early military things where, you know, for the first time in history, somebody didn't have to climb a mountain to see what the battlefield looked like. They could send up somebody in a balloon. Think from a different altitude. It all looks different. Here to understand all sides. You know, and remember you're talking about the issue. You're not talking about you and me. You and me conversation isn't going to take you very far from win-win by and large. Can you imagine a win-win outcome? You know, I mean, all you have to do is look at unhappy rich people and you see having more money doesn't automatically help everything. Having a really strong religious faith doesn't always help everything. You know, it's what looks like a win for him. And find out what all the sides of the issue are. What does a win-win outcome look like? If you can come up with an idea sometimes of what a win-win would look like, you can start to figure out, okay, what do we need? What do we need to create an action plan to create that? How do we go about it? It's always going to be a bigger process than you think. you know, we've all had the experience of something being easier than we expected, but we're more likely we've had the notion of everything's gotten harder. You know, and the older you get, the more you're gonna think that. A virtual guarantee. So you create an action plan and say, okay, here are the steps we gotta take. Now, how do we figure out what's urgent, what's important, or what isn't important, and so forth? Well, we got a tool for that, don't we? So you sit down, and one of the things that happens if you can collaborate with somebody, and it's hard, for me, it's harder to do on a computer, but you sit down and you start sketching some of this stuff out. And you put that little grid in front of you and start saying, well, here are the steps we know we need to take. What do we need to do to be able, what resources do we need? What money do we need? What time do we need? What can we put on the schedule to make that happen? You know, how do we commit to that? How big is this issue? So the issue you're talking about may be very small. Or it may be something that as you get into it becomes transcendent. So again, figuring out the action plan, you gotta also know, well, who's gonna do what, when? How are they accountable? What do we just do? We just said to get the win-win sometimes is a lot of work, but you're creating something that's sustainable. Because every time you're successful in an interaction, what just happened? Just put more marbles in the jar. That means you're more likely to have the other person want to participate in that activity in the future. What's the process look like? Go to work on it. Sometimes planning on things collectively, two people who disagree can turn the relationship around by simply agreeing to work on it together. You know, he's not as big a dope as I thought he was. And just in case you were kind of wondering what the win-win notion might apply to, I'll just list some of the things. Anybody ever have a disagreement with a spouse about taking a vacation? Okay, enough said.
Sounded like a serious.
Can we see pictures? Another way of showing the same thing. The smiley faces. All right. Here's the one that is, to me, I find in some respects the hardest. Let's seek first to understand, then be understood. Let me describe the technique to you. And I think that'll illustrate how this works. So you're in a disagreement with somebody about something. And you each hold different opinions about it. Well, ideally, the one who is perhaps the most emotionally remote from it, doesn't mean you're remote, just less engaged, less driven than the other person in the interaction. You say, I want to understand your position. Please explain. And you listen. And you look them in the eye. And you make notes. And you may say, wait, I'll make sure I get this right. Okay. What just happened? Just me pretending. Just me doing this. Hear the volume? And even just from motion, go down on the roof. Little thing like that. So you write it down. You may ask a probing question. You mean this? First of all, sometimes you want to know. Sometimes it may give you a question you want to just remember your only goal at this moment. And it's hard. Because remember, you got an opinion too. You can put it away, lock the door for a couple minutes. Get the cat out of the room while I'm on my meeting call. Your only goal is to understand as much as you can about who they are, where they're coming from, what their position is, their view of the issues. That's all you want. And sometimes you may find, because of time constraints or whatever, that's as far as you're gonna get on in a given interaction. That's okay. If you're smarter than you were before, and you definitely have time. Think about it. But what you do, and I've seen this work even when there's substantial time between the first piece of the conversation. What you do is you say, okay, I really want to make sure I have this right. And by this time, the room, you've chilled it a little bit, and they know you've paid attention because they watched you in. You weren't looking at your phone, you weren't distracted by it. You didn't fiddle too much. I'm some of the people that got a nervous leg and so forth. That's not bad. And what you just say, okay, I really want to make sure that you know that I'm listening. I want to make sure I understand. Can I feed back to you what I heard? So you give an absolutely fair, honest summation of what they just told you. And then you ask them, did I get that right? Did I miss something important? Because I want, and you may say at that point, you've given me a lot to think about. But we get back together later and talk about this more. All right. What's happened? A lot of the emotion will have fled the room, which makes life a little easier sometimes. And what's most interesting is you put yours in the back room where it can die for a while or a weekend. Then you say, the next segment is, okay, I understand that. Can I ask you to just quietly let me try to just share a couple of things? I'm not sure we have as big an argument as you may have thought. But what about, or you can say, what about this? Or here's how I see this working. Sometimes what you may do is you may see at that time that, oh, there's a win-win here that I didn't see before. There's a bigger idea. There's a better idea. Saying, I had some thoughts, and you've actually changed my mind about that. And so you come back with a position, and maybe you say, well, what if we did something like this? What'd you just do? You've got the continuity of the interaction. You got potential for a relationship. But if you had not stopped your own carousel, if you hadn't stopped and focused solely on them and what they think, that doesn't happen. It's a variation on the notion somebody's got to be the grown up. That's a way of characterizing it. I'm not sure it's a fair for that stuff. But so the idea of it is that when you're and I'm really bad at this. I'm one of those people who you hate to bump into because, you can say something, and I'm interested in a lot of different stuff. And there are a lot of interesting people in the world. I really believe you can't have enough interesting people. You can't have enough interactions with interesting people. And not all of them will reciprocate as you're interested. But so what happens is you've got a chance there to proactively move towards something different, something sustainable. If they've vented on you, all right. I mean, my wife and I, for example, have gotten to a point where, she'll have things that upset her, people that upset her that we have to deal with one way or another. And, it's just more of the, emotional response to the stuff. And I'm not above that. I am that way a lot of times myself. But the point is, by listening and feeding it back, over time, what's happened is that her response mechanism is now more chill than it used to be. Okay, I've seen it happen. That doesn't make me wise, just, lucky enough to solve a couple of tools to help. So, when you look at this stuff and you listen, you're giving yourself the opportunity to have a continuing relationship. You know, and remember also when we talk about, go back to the win-win for a minute. You know, it might be that little wins are the best you can hope for. And you haven't won if the other person only loses a little. Because again, what you just take out of the jar. The point, I guess, simply is recognizing that this is one of those where there is a skill, a technique involved. And it does work, it's very powerful. You fix everything, hell no, nothing does. But if you take the time to do that, you know, we all have our own calming mechanisms. You know, I heard a comedian say one time, said, yeah, I was so bad I wanted to get up and strangle my yoga instructor. So sometimes those techniques don't work. So try that. Next time that you're in an interaction and you think it's difficult, shut the hell up. Listen. And I started to say, my problem is I get excited by somebody. And maybe they're just venting, like my wife is. All right. And it's not the end all and be all issue. But sometimes by even positively reacting, being really interested and engaged, you know, you can set off a wrong reaction if you open your mouth. Because what I tend to do, I get excited and I interrupt it. I'll finish a sentence for him. I'm terrible about that. You know, I think after 75 years of practicing, I know better. But that's what happens. So I just urge you to try this technique. It's one that's well worth the investment time. And I imagine if, Jonathan, I'll put you on the hook here. If anybody wants to copy these slides, there's even some who will today want to look at them and stuff. They're welcome to. In fact, I paid for whoever created them, so you got permission. And again, watching these kinds of things is part of what you carry into a listening skill. Taking a class or lesson or an online thing on listening skills is really powerful. Listening, you know, as wise man said, you know, we were given 2 ears and 1 mouth, which is most important. These are some of the things that get in the way. Bored, I don't understand what you're saying. My attention's elsewhere. I've already made up my mind. I don't like you. I don't give a shit. You know, there's a lot of things that get in the way. And so it's not as simple as locking stuff away. It's shutting down these kind of things, setting them aside, not letting them drive your thoughts. Because the closer you get to it being a blank page, an interested blank page. Imagine a page that wanted your words. Would you write? Sure you would. All right. I get to share my thoughts, get them out there. That's what you want to create. Yeah, they talk about the principle of empathy. This is kind of interesting, and I might be worth getting this slide or print it out. Is the notion of favors. You know, you familiar with the concept of paying it forward? A couple times in my life, I've been lucky enough to be able to do something for somebody that had no expectation that I would do it, or even that I was willing to. And I was lucky enough to be able to say, I said, well, how can I pay you back? I said, you don't pay me back. You do this for somebody else. You know, gratuitous compassion, gratuitous generosity is contagious. And you do somebody a favor. You know, Well, maybe they're an ass and they don't respond, they don't even say thank you and so forth, that's okay, are you any worse? Feel good about yourself. You know, I'm not, I play country music, I'm not a big fan of country music, but I always like the title of the song, Wasting My Love in All the Wrong Places. Anybody else want to raise their hand? Yeah. The point of it is that the idea of gratuitous favors makes a lot of people want to reciprocate. And sometimes that's enough to get you started. You know, until Jonathan called me, I didn't know I'd had an effect on his life. I don't think it makes me feel, or I think I'm here today. You know, that made me feel good, and I thought, you know, if I can do that, make one person feel better or learn something here. You know, I mean, do I seem a little more energetic now than I did when I started? See what happens. You know, and I'm not such a good actor, I can make that up. You know, don't worry, 15 minutes after we leave here, I'll be busted. I'm recovering too, so never underestimate that. Synergize. 1 + 1 = 11. You know, sometimes what you can do, and sometimes it's worth going in and looking for it in that situation. What can I do that will transcend the question? You know, transcend the issue. How can I come up with something better? These are some principles that go into the idea of being able to do that. I have to value other people's strengths and learn from them. Get along with people. Work in groups. You know, not everybody is naturally a team player. Some are just lone rangers, and that's okay. But they have to learn to function. You know, my 8-year-old grandson is, you know, it's amazing. When he was born, I swear to God, within 18 months, I figured out that his role in life would be something that's the equivalent to being the ringmaster in a circus. Because he wants to be able to direct everybody to do things, explain to them what's going on, tell them about it, help make sure they really enjoy it, and then, for example, my wife got him as a birthday present Indianapolis 500 race trivia card set. All right. Now my wife grew up in Speedway, so she went to the races every year until she met me. I don't know anybody else that would give up going to a race with 500,000 people. Me, but she did, I guess. Well, no, I like it. Anyway, and so he loves playing with those cards. He's never the one to answer them. He's the one who's got the cards and is testing you. And he's smart enough. His mom has a photographic memory, I think he is too. So he probably is remembering all of these afterwards. But the point of it is that, you know, we're having his parents were making a real effort to get him involved in team stuff because, you know, when was the last time you thought of the ringmaster in a circus as a teammate? On the high wire, those people up there are doing things, yeah, they're teammates. Person in the middle often doesn't see them. And yet, being in the middle doesn't matter if you don't have a circus around you. So the point is that, you know, we have to be mindful that sometimes, and this is something I've been progress in society. This is just old white guy talking. When I went to law school, I went in 72. There were 6 or 7 women in a class of over 200. That was all. And most of them, it looked like they had a chip on their shoulder. You know, and one of the things I noticed was, you know, you'd see guys getting along and women had a harder time fitting into anything with the team. Lawyers are not necessarily team players anyway. But the fact that most of these women, some of whom I knew really well, had never been given much of an opportunity to function in a team. Their role had already been assigned to them in some shape or form, but there was no team. You know, kids sports, for example, I've seen horrible abuses of that before, trying to do some coaching. But what happens is that, you know, people have to learn how to function as a team. Team building is a whole separate exercise, and I would encourage you to, at some point, you know, do some program talking about how do you build it. But the point is that recognizing that not everybody in any society always feels comfortable being on a team at all, or on a team with people like you want it. And that's just something else to keep in mind. And so the burden of creating a team works. I mean, I know I work best in a team if I'm running, if I created it. I have a knack of being able to do that, getting people to pull together. Not make a fortune or anything, but so let's recognize that working in a team is another piece of your challenge as a supervisor, leader. How do I get them to function as a team? Because you're not concerned about just your interaction one-on-one with the person, or that person's role with respect to the job or the role they're assigned. But how are they dealing with the other people? Okay, so again, all this stuff carries over, and the synergy is something where you can say, we can make the whole team better. It's not a compromise where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Here's some things at the top there that I think are worthwhile. You know, synergy is kind of one of those things that's a little difficult to wrap your arms around. If you change your mind about something, and it seems to flow from some interaction with somebody or something, there's been a synergy that was created. You feel new energy and excitement. You've added something to the mix. Here's one worth remembering. All right, very powerful when I first heard it. Frustration is a diagnostic tool. Frustration tells you that something is missing. If people had available to them all the resources they found necessary to remove frustration, they would already use them. But maybe they have a bunch of tools, but they don't have the energy. Maybe they don't have the skill. Maybe they don't, whatever. But the point of it is, anytime you see somebody frustrated, try to figure out what's missing. Because there's something missing. And so as you're trying to probe and find a way through it, look for that. And I didn't hear that one until maybe 8 or 9 years ago. And I thought that was one of the just a genius thing, and I paid attention, and I really still believe. You know, lots of times what they're missing is, again, who decides they're missing something? Well, they've decided they're missing something. That's when they're present. They just haven't seen the cause and effect. So sometimes you see things in a different way. Sometimes you come out of an interaction, you say, I don't feel at all the same as I did about that person or about the subject matter. For example, it was interesting. I was watching a program and it involved a very, very bright guy. I can't think of his name off the top of my head. Something to me if somebody would have looked at that. Anyway, one of the talking heads on YouTube, but somebody who's on a lot of different programs, and just I really like the way he thinks. And he was talking, and he's not Christian; he's Jewish by background. And the other guy was not Jewish, but was an atheist. And the bright guy started talking about the role of music and the experience of the sacred that people can have going into certain churches, going into a church place. For example, years ago, I got to go to Rome when I went down into what's called Scavi. Well, that's a first century graveyard that's located underneath St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. You can go down there. It's excavated. You're walking on ground that 2 centuries ago was a graveyard next to an amphitheater. And the story goes, the legend goes, that St. Peter was crucified in that amphitheater nearby and was put in a grave on this hillside. And that there was a small grave there, and then there was a little bit of a monument put there without his name on it. And then when Constantine came along and said Christianity was okay legally, then ultimately, because he recognized it was a coming movement inside of the Roman Empire, and who knows whether he really was serious about his own conversion. But he built a church where the high altar was directly over where this tomb was located. And the current St. Peter's, which was built in the 15th, 16th, 17th century, somewhere there, is basically built over where the old one was, with the high altar again directly over it. And the result is that you can track the provenance and stuff. Yeah, there was something there in the 2nd century, and it's directly underneath the high altar. And when they dug it out, what they found, thank you very much for being there, is they found this graveyard, and so they found a place that might have had it both, it might be in both. The point of it is that it doesn't matter whether you believe it or not. Go into that kind of space when it transforms you, because people treated it as sacred for 2,000 years. Just remember the hairs on the back of my neck. I didn't know whether St. Peter was there or not. It really didn't matter. But you see how your brain can change by some experience like that. And this fellow that was talking said, those kinds of experiences, are what you deprive yourself of if you've decided that there is no God. Or you're saying these responses to religious music or to whatever. Do you not believe in that has some effect on people? So the point of it is that sometimes you can say, I don't believe in X, but that doesn't mean there isn't a wealth of related experience that you can't learn from. So again, transforming things, synergy, defined as something you didn't expect to be there. And oftentimes, again, you go in saying, it's not me winning, my idea ruling the day, it's us finding something that works. You end up with something that's better than what you even imagined. Okay, let me just wrap up here. This is sharpening the saw. There's a song lyric so long, take care of yourself, but nobody else will. We all have self-abusive practices, habits. Spend too much time sitting in a chair. We do too many 12-ounce bicep curls. What's that?
Is it too many?
Yeah. Yeah. Your carpal tunnel.
All right.
Whole body experience. But no, the point of it is that, and trust me, I'm the oldest person in this room. I'm getting used to that sensation. And you really do, first of all, almost everything your parents told you, it was true. Sorry, that's bad news. Secondly, all those things you're supposed to do and you don't, but it's a lot better if you don't. The things you thought, guys, I shouldn't do this, you were right the first time. And so the point of it is that paying attention to yourself, you have to start there. Again, my body, how I feel with my body is a direct focus of my mind. And today has given me an opportunity to stimulate both of them. And I thank you for that. Answer any questions if you have any. I'll tell you where to go look something up. All right. Thank you.
And I will just encourage you guys, particularly if you found anything particularly interesting, in particular habit. Online on YouTube, you can literally listen to Stephen Covey, the author of the 7 Habits, give a lecture on every habit, and they're all free on YouTube. And he's got some good stories that can help you process through it. I know after I listened to David, it led me to YouTube where I listened to the books on tape, which I've returned many times since when I'm like, I'm not doing a good job on this quadrant thing, you know, like I'm spending way too much time being busy. And I have a tendency to navigate there. Like that's like just a comfort zone for me. I can fill my day, right? And it's not the most productive crap if I'm not careful. So I would encourage you to dive in a little bit further and to grab that information. Like I said, YouTube's free, so it's a great resource.
And I would encourage you to provide, I mean, first of all, you know you're gonna go talk about this, because every one of you committed in your own mind, you're gonna do something from somebody else. But if you got any feedback, easiest email for me, probably, or you send something to me if you want to, is david@chrislaw.com. That's not the one you have, but that's one that does.
Oh, the law.
Since it's left over from the law firm, it doesn't get a lot of activity, because, thank goodness. And or you can work up something where somebody can collect emails and make them anonymous or whatever, but I would like your feedback. Again, this may be the last one of these I ever do, I don't know. But I've had a great time doing it. Thank you for giving me that.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
And we're adjourned.
I was thinking.
You mentioned
Yeah.
that you.
That's right, consider it a donation. I paid for it, you can use it if you want.
Okay.
You know, again, some of the stuff's mine, some of it, I think there might be a slide. About what it is.
Okay.
They got a whole segment on self-improvement.
Yeah.
Just a few slides there, but.
Yeah, I'll forward the slides out to everybody that attended today, so they'll
Okay.
have it.
Yeah, okay.
Excellent.
Thank
Alright,
you.
well, thank you, David.
Well, that's all right. I enjoyed it a lot. Pleasure to be here. I realized I really missed being used.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you appreciate it at the time? That's
Thank you for setting things up. You made it absolutely idiot proof. You demonstrated that today.
No, thank you for bringing it on.
Before. All right, well, thank you. We'll talk again, I'm sure.
Alright.
And I'm happy to talk anytime. you want.
wondered if that helped.
I'll probably reach out to you sometime.
God will write. God will do.
Excellent. Thank you.
Now.
Like all.
All of it?
Well,
Yeah.
I've been wondering what's gonna happen with yellow lipstick. What I've learned is, it's really good to say that. I didn't want to go along. Because sometimes they think looking at what they're saying. Keith was supposed to be on that. It reminded me. You might let them know there's gonna be on. So. That's what you should do tomorrow.
Sometimes when you get feedback.
I went out 2 days ago.
Whenever it was like raining.
Yeah. Did Tom, the power going out?
Do I?
The power went out 2 days ago at 7:53, and it's like 8:53 or something.
I don't know anything about that.
How'd you find that?
All.
Did you get a log report or something?
And the Ubiquity thing, it showed all the APs went out at Life Center and 7:53 for like 2 minutes.
Well,
I think they. Yeah, 2 days ago.
Oh, because they're PoE, or they're, they've got the adapter, so it's
Yeah,
like
so it
hardwired.
knows.
Yeah.
Switches and stuff.
Yeah.
Monday then?
Yeah, it was Monday night. Everything came up for me, but.
Yeah, yeah,
saw
apparently we
earlier.
weren't out very long.
No.
Weird.
I didn't have none.
Yeah.
It would have helped if it'd been Saturday, but it wasn't.
Oh, really?
Why Saturday?
Cause fire alarm went off Saturday.
Trying to figure out why.
I still think it's because the city had too much pressure, but I can't prove that.
I suspect you're right.
I know, but I was like,
Now, I suspect that may have been part of the problem with the old system.
Too much pressure?
Incoming line
Yeah.
pressure on the sprinkler side.
Water pressure.
It seems like when they screw with the fire hydrants, or like Friday, they had a fire